the modern world has quietly rewritten the meaning of a meaningful life. We celebrate packed calendars, crowded cafes, weekend plans, and constant movement as proof that someone is truly living. If your phone is always buzzing, your social life always expanding, and your schedule always full, people assume you're happy. But psychology suggests something surprising. For many people, the place where they feel most alive isn't outside at all. It's the moment the front door closes behind them. This isn't because they're afraid of life. It's because their brain processes life differently. Most conversations about people who love staying home begin with personality. Introvert versus extrovert, shy versus outgoing. But those labels barely scratch the surface. They describe behavior, not the invisible psychological mechanisms creating that behavior. What if staying home isn't primarily a social preference? What if it's actually a sophisticated form of emotional regulation? Your home is one of the few environments where your nervous system can accurately predict what will happen next. The sounds are familiar, the lighting is familiar, the pace is familiar. In neuroscience, the brain constantly tries to reduce uncertainty because uncertainty consumes mental energy. Every unfamiliar face, unexpected conversation, loud environment, or shifting social expectation requires your brain to make thousands of rapid predictions. Home dramatically lowers that cognitive load. This changes the question entirely. These people aren't necessarily choosing isolation over connection. They're choosing a space where their mind stops defending itself long enough to simply exist. That distinction matters, because once you understand this, you'll realize that loving home isn't always about escaping the world. Sometimes it's about returning to the only place where your thoughts are finally quiet enough to hear themselves. One of the biggest misconceptions about people who love staying home is that they have a smaller life. Psychologically, the opposite is often true. Researchers sometimes describe this as having a high level of internal self-presence, the ability to remain mentally engaged with one's own thoughts, emotions, memories, and imagination without immediately seeking external stimulation. Instead of constantly asking, "What's happening out there?" their attention naturally shifts toward, "What's happening within me?" That subtle difference changes everything. While some people need continuous novelty to feel alive, these individuals generate much of that richness internally. A quiet afternoon isn't experienced as empty space. It's filled with reflection, creative associations, future possibilities, forgotten memories, and emotional processing that rarely has room to emerge in noisy environments. Interestingly, neuroscience suggests that the brain's default mode network, a network active during quiet wakefulness, is deeply involved in autobiographical memory, imagination, self-reflection, and making meaning from life experiences. Moments of stillness are not moments when the brain switches off. In many ways, it begins some of its most important work. That's why sitting by a window with a cup of coffee can feel unexpectedly fulfilling. To someone else, nothing is happening. To them, dozens of invisible conversations are unfolding inside the mind. Their happiness isn't dependent on constant events because their attention isn't fueled only by external rewards. They have developed the rare ability to experience depth without needing intensity. And in a culture that often mistakes stimulation for fulfillment, that quiet inner richness becomes one of the most overlooked forms of psychological resilience. The defining trait isn't that they think more than everyone else. It's that they think differently. Psychologists call this introspection, the deliberate habit of observing your own thoughts, emotions, and motives instead of reacting to them automatically. But healthy introspection isn't endless overthinking. It's pattern recognition directed inward. Someone makes a careless comment. Many people move on within minutes. An introspective person may spend the evening asking, "Why did that affect me so much? Why did I become defensive? What old memory did that touch?" They're not replaying the moment because they enjoy suffering. They're trying to understand the hidden architecture of their own mind. Research on self-reflection suggests that this process can strengthen emotional awareness and support wiser long-term decisions, but only when it is paired with curiosity rather than self-criticism. The goal isn't to judge yourself. It's to become easier for yourself to understand. This is one reason people who enjoy staying home often appear calm during difficult situations. Their emotional processing usually begins long before a crisis arrives. They've spent countless quiet hours examining their fears, values, regrets, and hopes. Over time, those private conversations become psychological maps. While the outside world measures intelligence by how quickly someone responds, introspective people often develop a different kind of wisdom. They respond more slowly, not because they're uncertain, but because they've learned that the first reaction is rarely the deepest truth. Here's the part that most people misunderstand. People who love staying home aren't always protecting themselves from people. More often, they're protecting their mental bandwidth. Every environment places invisible demands on the brain. Background conversations, facial expressions, traffic noise, social expectations, unexpected interruptions, even deciding how to respond in a casual conversation requires constant prediction and self-monitoring. For some nervous systems, none of these experiences are overwhelming individually. Together, however, they quietly drain cognitive energy. Home reverses that process. Not because nothing happens there, but because almost everything is predictable. Predictability allows the brain to reduce vigilance, conserve mental resources, and shift away from constantly scanning for potential stressors. But there's another layer that people rarely discuss. Sometimes, home becomes emotionally meaningful because it is the first place where someone no longer feels they have to perform. They don't need to appear more confident, more outgoing, more successful, or more acceptable. For those who have spent years adapting themselves to meet other people's expectations, closing the front door can feel like taking off invisible emotional armor. Of course, psychology also reminds us to ask one important question. Is home restoring your energy, or gradually replacing your life? The same behavior can represent emotional health or emotional avoidance. The difference isn't measured by how much time you spend at home, but by what happens afterward. A healthy sanctuary prepares you to re-enter the world. A hiding place quietly convinces you to stop believing you belong in it. Because their inner world is carefully protected, these individuals rarely build relationships quickly. Trust for them isn't created through frequent conversations or shared hobbies. It's created through emotional consistency. While many people pay attention to what others say, people who love staying home often pay closer attention to what others repeat. They notice small behavioral patterns that most people overlook: a delayed reply after difficult conversations, a change in someone's tone when they're exhausted, or whether kindness disappears when circumstances become inconvenient. Psychologists sometimes describe this as thin slice perception, our ability to form surprisingly accurate impressions from subtle behavioral cues. Although first impressions are never perfect, people who spend more time observing than performing often become highly sensitive to these quiet signals. This is why their circle tends to remain small. They're not searching for more people, they're searching for emotional safety, and once someone earns that trust, their way of loving can seem unusually steady. Instead of dramatic declarations, they often express affection through presence, reliability, remembering tiny details, or creating spaces where others can finally relax without pretending. Ironically, people who seem distant at first are often capable of the deepest commitment, because for them, love isn't measured by how often you show up. It's measured by whether someone can feel completely at home in your presence. Perhaps the greatest burden people who love staying home carry isn't solitude itself. It's the story society tells about solitude. Modern culture often equates visibility with value. If you're constantly networking, traveling, posting updates, or filling every weekend with plans, you're seen as ambitious and engaged. If you choose quiet evenings at home, people may assume something is missing, that you're lonely, unmotivated, or somehow living less. Psychology challenges that assumption. The real question has never been, how social are you? It's, does your lifestyle help you flourish? There's an important distinction between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness is the painful feeling of lacking meaningful connection. Solitude is the intentional choice to spend time alone while still feeling connected to yourself and to the people who matter. Those are psychologically different experiences. In fact, many creative breakthroughs, moments of emotional healing, and major life decisions emerge during periods of uninterrupted solitude rather than constant stimulation. Silence gives the brain enough space to integrate experiences instead of simply reacting to them. So perhaps the goal isn't to become someone who always goes out, nor is it to hide from the world. The healthier goal is much simpler. Build a life where being alone feels peaceful, but where connecting with others still feels possible. Because true psychological freedom isn't choosing one over the other, it's having the ability to choose both. Loving home has never really been about four walls. It's about discovering a place where your mind no longer has to compete for attention. In a world that constantly encourages more noise, more speed, and more visibility, choosing stillness can look unusual. But psychology reminds us that a meaningful life isn't measured by how full your calendar is. It's measured by whether your daily environment allows you to think clearly, feel deeply, and remain connected to who you truly are. If home gives you that space, there is nothing inherently wrong with loving it. At the same time, don't let comfort quietly become confinement. The healthiest home is not a place that separates you from life. It is the place that prepares you to return to it with greater clarity, patience, and emotional strength. Maybe that's the real purpose of peace. Not to escape reality, but to restore the part of yourself that reality constantly asks you to spend. So, if you've ever felt guilty for preferring a quiet evening over another crowded event, remember this. You don't have to apologize for protecting your nervous system. You don't have to apologize for needing silence to hear your own thoughts. Because the people who know how to build peace within themselves often become the very people who bring peace to everyone around them. And perhaps that's one of the quietest strengths a person can possess.